Welcome to Paranormal Latte Podcast. I am your host, Dr. Kellie Renee Schutz. Sit back and relax with us. Grab yourself a really good drink. Spend an hour and let's delve into a world of chatter about the mysteries of the unexplained. Whether you are a skeptic or a believer makes no difference. It's not always in your imagination. Enjoy your day. Now that was good. We are broadcasting on the United Public Radio and UFO Paranormal Radio Networks, 105.3 FM from the Gulf Coast and 107.7 FM in New Orleans. The views and opinions expressed by the host and guests do not necessarily reflect those of the audience, United Public Radio and UFO Paranormal Radio Networks, its hosts, affiliates, and or Paranormal Latte Podcast, Paranormal Universal Press LLC, and Diamond Point Entertainment LLC. This show is pre-recorded. Now that was good. Good day, everyone, and thanks again for joining me for another episode of Paranormal Latte Podcast. My name is Dr. Kellie Renee Schutz, and I am the host and producer of this show. Well, we have a very interesting guest this evening. Kellie Fitzgerald is in the house, and what makes her so fascinating? Well, she's an author. She's written children's books. She is constantly on the move regarding her work, but there's one thing about her that many of us have not experienced yet, and that is she passed away, I believe it was within the last year or two, and she had been gone from our planet for a good 12 minutes. In and out, and of course, she will describe for us what her experience in what we at most would call heaven or another realm was all about. But before we get to that interview, why don't we learn just a little bit more about my special guest this evening, Kellie Fitzgerald. Perhaps one of the most talented individuals I have met in a long time, Kellie Fitzgerald certainly fits that mold. Have you ever met someone in life and wondered to yourself, wow, that person seems to know how to read me like a book without me ever saying a word? These are the mysteries that we wonder about. There are many of us in this world who are actually quite gifted. So much so that it scares other people. And when you wonder about why someone would be so scared to get to know you just because you might be a little bit more knowing than most people, then you wonder why or what it is that makes that situation feel so unsettling. My guest can perhaps relate to the one factor that we lived with most of our young life. People saying to us, "You scare me." Now think about that for just a moment as I tell you a little bit about my guest, Kellie Fitzgerald. Kellie is a lifelong intuitive. She has always had abilities and gifts which at times didn't necessarily make her fit in with just anyone, anywhere. She was able to see, hear, and know things about other people that basically left her even wondering herself how she was able to turn on, but somehow not necessarily turn off, the very gifts and abilities that made her. Kellie learned to embrace the things about her that made her be a bit different than the normal crowd. We have a lot to learn about, so sit back and grab a book. But I have a feeling you're not going to be opening that book to just any one page, because the page that you're going to read about is my special guest, Kellie Fitzgerald. Well, hello, Kellie, and thank you so very much for being on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, having you back. Yes. So many of you who may or may not have been following me, Kellie was on, I think, a couple years ago on a different program, and we're going to shoot her out on this program and see how it all goes, and I'm sure she'll be just great. And you look great, by the way. She's gone through a lot in the last couple years, and we're going to talk a little bit about that and where she's been. So let's start out by getting acquainted. So Kellie, the first thing I'd like to do is just basically have you give a mini biography or just a short segment of yourself, and then we'll go from there.
Okay. I've always been one of those people that could see and hear things no one else saw or heard. I've always been, we call it on the psychic spectrum in my family. There's many different kinds of spectrums you can be on, but we call ours the psychic spectrum. And I've always been on that. I always have been a writer as well. Before I could write down my stories, I would just tell them to people, many of whom were not at all interested in what a little kid had to say. I've done paranormal investigations. I've done animal rescue. People look at me funny when I say those two things back to back, but trust me when I tell you they go very well together. There are a number of beings around all of us that we just don't notice. We're just not open to seeing them. So, I've been a medium. Some days I talk to more dead people than I do living ones. And I have a new book coming out next month, which is called Family Secrets, that has a lot of those aspects. A little bit of the animal stuff, a little bit of magical stuff, a lot of paranormal stuff. So it sort of was probably the easiest book I've ever written in my life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that'll be exciting when that one comes out. And again, is that a flavor of paranormal? Does it have anything spiritual in it? Is it a flavor of everything, or how would you classify it?
I've had people reading over the last month, and what keeps coming up is it is deeply spiritual. It teaches that love will overcome everything, and it is not the least bit Christian, which gets people. Normally, when you have something that comes in that is demonic, that is being fought, or it is some kind of dark energy that is being fought, it is usually people invoking archangels and Jesus and all of the Christian stuff. This has none of that. We have a Buddhist monk. We have a woman whose family had been in Appalachia forever, and she knows a lot of root magic and, what they called granny magic and that kind of stuff. And that is really throughout this entire book. That's the theme, is there is more than one way. People used to say there's more than one way to skin a cat. There's more than one way to fight a demon, too. Yeah. So I think, especially working in the paranormal realms, I think more people need to know that, because that is not really on paranormal shows. It's always call a priest. How about call a shaman? How about call the old woman over here that has grown up with this? So that's kind of what it is.
Yeah, I call old wisdom. I mean, the thing is this stuff has been going on, and Kellie knows this because she's practically an expert in this. But the thing is this stuff has been going on for a long time. But when people, the thing is as we age and we grow up from being a young person, that's when our experiences start. And so a lot of times it's very hard for people to wrap their head around going back, or somebody else back in time has also had experiences or these attitudes or their perspectives about things. So, yeah, and sometimes we just have to remind people a little bit about what goes on out there. And of course, Kellie lives in a very interesting area. Wouldn't call you a mountain woman, but I would call you someone that lives in a mountain. How would you describe your area that you live in?
Think 1850s Wild West.
Interesting.
It is beautiful. There is a lot of stuff going on spiritually and paranormally in this area because some very, very bad things happened to the indigenous people that were already here. I grew up, blonde hair, blue eyes. I was certainly not Native American. And yet I've studied shamanism extensively. There are different packets of shamanism depending on the tribe, depending on the part of the country, depending on which country. Canada has a wonderful, history of this, as does Mexico. So to me, this area, if you know what you are looking at, not necessarily looking for, because they'll just pop up. Yeah. If you know what you're looking at, it's fascinating. There is so much to learn. But this is the wild, wild west still today. And not a whole lot has changed. There is a nearby town who is essentially the same as it was 100 years ago.
Cool.
And I'm writing a book about that too, coming up next year. But a lot of things happened here that were not pleasant, really, for anyone. Yeah. Part of what I teach people when I teach, and I do teach spirituality and, working with elementals, which are abundant everywhere. I tell people, when you see something, you're not just looking at what you're looking at. Relax your eyes, look deeper, look past it. There may be a stump, and I was up in the mountains recently with 2 students, and we saw this stump. There have been a number of major fires up in these mountains. Mm-hmm. And we were looking at this stump, and it was burned, but it had burned where it went down into the center of the stump, and a new tree was growing back out of the center of that. Yeah. And we were looking at it going, wow, isn't that amazing? Look what nature will heal herself.
Yeah.
And I said, but what else do you see? And they're like, huh? Step back, relax your eyes, take a deep breath, look past, don't stare at, look through. What do you see? And then a whole new world opened up. And those are the things I think we need to pay more attention to teaching people. Yeah. Because it is all very real. Just because you don't see it doesn't mean it isn't real.
No, that's exactly part of my theme. Just because you don't see me doesn't mean I'm not here. Sometimes it is here. And a lot of people do say that these living, trees, flowers, everything that you can think of, even, I don't know, I have a hard time sometimes wrapping my head around rocks, but, they even say that that's kind of a living type of inanimate object or whatever. And it's just kind of, I know people see it and they go, well, it's just a rock, but I don't know. There's energy in everything, including these rocks. And by the way, she lives up on a mountain where that sun is probably pretty penetrating. And so everything around her is getting a good solid dose of rays or energy or something. And so I can only imagine, I would love to be just something looking at that town that you're talking about, that back, 100 years ago, when these things just kind of sit stagnant, they still have life to some degree. It's just we don't necessarily see what the life is, even though is it an abandoned town?
No, it's not completely. But if you look at it, one of the things that I have done throughout my life in meditation is if I want to look at the energy of something, I have the ability to raise above it and look down. And you see the spirals, you see the tendrils coming off. And a lot of them around that particular town are very, very dark. And when you ask questions, and I ask question after question to my guides, and like I said, I did study shamanism, so I have that avenue as well with Native American peoples that I have studied with, and living and deceased, and stories about things that happened and how horribly the Native Americans were treated when white settlers came here, and all of these terrible, terrible stories that you will not find in a history book. But these people believe these things happened. And you have to look at a whole culture. It's not like one kid said something, 100 years ago. The whole culture is in agreement. This is what happened. And curses were uttered. And people need to understand sometimes there are repercussions to your actions.
Yeah.
Karma works.
Yeah.
It's always a good thing to go in with an open heart rather than letting your mind go, nope, I'm doing it this way, this, because that'll get you in trouble. Maybe not immediately, but it will down the road.
Well, it's fascinating, and I agree. I mean, a lot of us, we just keep marching to the beat of the drum here, but there are things that do happen and affect people that do last a very, very long time. So let's jump back for a second, because again, for those of you meeting Kellie here for the very first time, how did you fall into either paranormal or otherworldly or spiritual? How far back can you go, and what happened that started either your awakening, or you just realized that there's another part of this world here?
I could always see things that nobody else could see. It was, well, my very first memory is they put the baby in the haunted room is what they did. That's what they did. I don't know if that's what did it, but my first memory is of, I always thought he was a male figure leaning over the crib going, like he couldn't breathe. And it didn't scare me. I thought it was the funniest thing ever, and animals have always been around me. It took me months to realize the cat I was playing with was not a live living cat. I just saw them as real. They were there. What do you mean there's not a cat there? I'm petting it right now. And it really freaked people out in my family. They're like, oh no, what do we do with this one? But it's been a lifelong, I tell people it's been a lifelong affliction. And I mentioned to you before we started the show, I have been battling with some health issues. And about a week ago now, I did my first paranormal investigation in months. And I was like, yes, I'm back. It's just something when it gets in your blood, you can't get it out. It's like, that's who you are. And since I've always spoken with other beings, to me, it's fun. It's learning. It's, why are you still here? Why are you being mean to that person over there? What did they do to you? That kind of stuff is just really interesting to me. It's, walk into an old Victorian home in San Francisco, and I had bought it. It had been abandoned. I was going to, restore it a bazillion years ago. This is not recent. But, I walk in and there's this little room that's like barely bigger than a closet. And I said, all right, why'd you do this? And I hear we needed storage. That is where the brooms and mops were kept. You walk through it. There was room over here for cleaning supplies, room over here for cleaning supplies. There was no other storage. Okay, I get it. And then, the real estate agent at that point thought I had lost my freaking mind. But I said, this was where they stored cleaning supplies. See, you can tell on the walls, there used to be shelves here. Somebody removed the shelves. If there had been shelves there, I could have walked through and said, oh, this was storage. But because the shelves were gone, it made no sense at all. So you learn a lot being open. But people get confused. You're not leading with your mind. You're leading with your heart. And yes, you need lots of protection before you do this. But you learn how to do it. And you learn that sometimes beings that look mean or horrifying are the sweetest entities you can come across. And that's why you lead with your heart, because your head as a human being is going to put you into fear mode. And if you're afraid, you're not going to see anything. You know, I told this story a long time ago where the very first time I went scuba diving, and I had always wanted to. I grew up around water. I wanted to scuba dive. And the first time was in the Bahamas, went scuba diving. All the fish were black. I could see no colors because I was so afraid. It might have had something to do with Jaws had just come out.
I'm going to say, that would be a little bit on the terrifying side. I have a question for you regarding your ability to hear voices. Now, I'm telepathic. When I'm on, I'm really on, which means but I don't usually hear male or female voices. I just hear a voice of something that speaks to me, and I pick it up. How do you sense or hear those that are communicating with you?
It depends on them. I did a reading the other day for someone, and she said the same thing you just said. You know, I kind of hear, but all I hear is this one voice. Well, that is your higher self, most likely, and you just need to move out of the way, let the other ones come through. And I hear distinct voices. If it is not going to be a distinct voice, it will be a distinct picture. Mm-hmm. You know, I kept seeing images of old trucks and more old trucks, and they were all different colors and all different makes and models. And I said, okay, they're showing me a series of old trucks. Her grandfather had a truck car lot, I guess a truck lot.
Truck lot. Mm-hmm.
And she said, that's Grandpa. Okay. Didn't hear a voice, but I was seeing pictures. Mm-hmm. And it depends on them. A lot of the time, they don't have enough energy, or they haven't been there long enough. People always I want to communicate with my mom died. Okay, well, when did she die? Well, yesterday. Okay, she's not going to talk yet. You know?
Yeah.
Not going to talk yet. But, sometimes they are quite chatty. I have a personal guide that I received from an old client. She passed away. And when I would do readings for her, she would always talk about Dewey. Dewey. And I'm like, Dewey?
Yeah.
Like Dewey or Dewey? Yeah. And it was his name. And she said he's a great uncle. He's an Aussie. And, we would communicate with him. When she passed away, in the middle of the night, there's a man standing beside my bed going, good day, I'm Dewey. I'm with you now. And I went, oh, great. She gave me Dewey.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that. So when you do readings like that, are you acquiring some of these individuals or something? Or that one seems...
Depends. Sometimes he had been her guide. And sometimes when we ascend, when we go on to the next level, if we have done enough work as a human being and we are ready to ascend to the next level, and maybe that's where reincarnation comes in. Some of us take a lot longer to get there than others. Mm-hmm. But when we do that, we have choices. People think, oh, I just kick back forever. No. There's still work to do. And you can be a guide. You can choose that to be a guide, either for loved ones or for people you just resonate with. Mm-hmm. And in his case, which he is a Kiwi, not an Aussie, she was incorrect. He says he's a Kiwi. And he just decided well, I was guiding that one, I'll guide this one now. And they can do that. Sometimes they will flip between family members. You have a large family and like a father figure crossed over. He may come to this one and then that one and then this one and over there. They can choose to come back into a family if they want. I don't know why anyone would want to, but but that's a choice. So people have some misconceptions with what happens, when we die. Choices. Yeah.
So speaking of, Kellie has a story about when she died, and I believe, if I recall this correctly, correct me if I'm wrong, didn't you say you were pronounced dead for about 12 minutes? I can't remember. Is that right?
Yeah. They kept bringing me back and losing me. What was happening, and I told one of the EMTs that was working so hard on me, turned out to be a friend of a friend, and he wasn't going to give up. He was like, nope, I'm not going to be the one to tell her. Nope, you're not going to. And I reconnected with him afterwards. And he said, it was like we were playing tug of war with you. That's because you were playing tug of war with me. Because I was on the other side hanging on to a friend, going, don't take me back. Yeah. But
Tell them the story about what happened, because people are wondering, well, how did she die? Car accident, or how did
ultimately my heart stopped, but it stopped because of an infection. I have, and you can still see I have a scar right here. I have a number of autoimmune issues. One of them gives me sores in my cheek. They're like big cysts. And it's happened for decades. So usually when it happens, I go to the doctor, they give me antibiotics, it goes away, no big deal. But out here in the Wild Wild West, I went to the doctor. They said, yeah, it's infected, just wash your mouth out, like every couple hours and it'll be fine. I'm like, I need antibiotics. You're not getting this. I need antibiotics. Oh, no, they've been overprescribed and we think this will heal up. Well, it didn't heal up. And I got sicker and sicker, and it got into my bloodstream, and it went to my heart, and my heart went, no, and stopped. I do not remember calling 911 or calling anyone, but I had to have. So I don't know. I guess they kept me alive long enough to make sure help was on the way. Or the dogs are really talented. Either one. It could go either way. But when the ambulance got here to my house, they realized I was dying. And they had to keep me alive. And they did not have the experience or the equipment to do that. So I sat on my front porch while a horrified looking, very young ambulance technician was staring at me like, what are you waiting for? I'm dying here. Well, they called another ambulance. So the second ambulance came, and I died in that ambulance briefly, and they brought me back. And I remember waking up and going, crap, I'm in an ambulance. What if I'm stuck in an ambulance forever? What if I cannot get out of this ambulance? And I was making myself think and laugh about the possibility of a soul being stuck in an ambulance for all eternity. And that brought me back. I started breathing. And periodically things would happen that would make me laugh, and I would start breathing. And that happened until they got me to the helicopter. And once I was in the helicopter, I was like, nah, I'm out. I've made it to the helicopter. I've done my duty. Leave me alone. And I remember sitting outside the helicopter, looking at the view. And that's how I knew I had died. But it was an infection that went into my bloodstream. and caused my heart to stop. I was gone for a long time, and they did all sorts of medical tests. They were sure I would have brain damage or something, and they were looking, and I was kind of in and out when they were looking at things. They finally, a doctor came in and he said, "Are you Buddhist?" "I don't subscribe to any religion." "No." "Okay. Why?" Your brain activity is like that of a Buddhist monk in meditation." And I said, "Well, let me tell you, death is one hell of a meditation. I mean, I don't know how else to put it." And he just kind of laughed. And I said, "Can I see those tests?" And yeah, we'll get them to you. Never saw those. Never saw those results. And I asked for them repeatedly, and nurses asked for them, and doctors, the same doctor who had spoken to me, looked at this nurse like he didn't know what she was talking about. So I don't know what was on those tests really, but there's a bajillion videos on YouTube that you can look at to see brain activity of psychics. I think that's what it was. I think it had very little to do with the fact that I had died. I think my brain just works differently, as does everyone else who is like I am. But you can't really tell a doctor that. They don't want to hear that.
Oh, doctors, are you kidding? When I had the handprint on my body that stayed there for 3 hours, nice and bedded, red, purple.
Yep.
There was one guy, there was one doctor, and I brought it up. I said, "Can you explain to me how a handprint gets on somebody's body?" And they just shut down immediately. I have to preface this, though, again, and I bring it up periodically on the show, because I've worked in law and I've worked in all kinds of things, and depending on what you're trained in, there are ways that you have to look at things, think about things. You're not going to have the same, even if it's a medical profession, you're not going to have the same doctor in this look at the same thing in that. They have their different theories or different ideas. And so to bring that up to a doctor, like I was telling someone on the show a few weeks ago, I said, I said it at the stand-up that I just got done doing for Spooky Night. But anyway, I said to everyone, I said, what are you supposed to do? Say to the doctor, I want a CT scan, I want an MRI, I want to see if there's something weird going on with me and all that. Because in a lot of cases, if they can't justify it, and it'll come out of your pocket, first of all. And that's a big, big expense for just a fly-by-night. I want to see what's in my body. So I don't know. So after that, how many days were you in the hospital for?
I had 2 weeks. I think it was 13 days or something like that. The first 2 or 3 days was not in my body. And I remember watching nurses come in and take vitals, and I'm like up here watching them going, "You're not going to wake me up," And it just, it took me a while for my friends on the other side to talk me into coming back. And, I spoke to people in those couple of days. I don't remember talking to them. They swear they spoke to me. I asked one person, "Were you sure it was me?" Because I don't have any knowledge of it. But, I looked at my phone records, and my phone talked to somebody, whoever it was. It was really surreal. And all I could do was laugh. And, my daughter was frantic and boo-hooing, and my friends were all upset. And I'm like, look what I can do. And I'm spinning, it was just, I was not upset. I was completely fine. I was like, "You guys will get over it. It'll be okay." And they were like, "You have to go back." "No, I don't want to go back." "You have to go. I don't want to." So it was kind of, it took me for sure 2, but I think really 3 days to get completely back in my body where I would stay there. A couple of times I came back, but I went out, and it was just I don't know.
Well, you know, the old, what people are thinking right now, they're asking, the next question, of course, is, so, you know, where do you go when you die? Is there a God? Who did you meet? What does it look like on the other side? What kind of details can you give us about what your experience has been? Because a lot of people, if they have certain belief systems or whatnot, they may have different death experiences as well. What was your details for your death experience like? Did you go through a tunnel? Did you see nothing? What can you tell us about what you went through?
The one thing that was impressed upon me more than anything else is we all have our own experience. Whatever you believe you deserve on the other side is what you will create for yourself. We create that for ourselves. It was, for me, I went through a psychedelic hallway. It was like painted by the Grateful Dead, you know, like black art, scribbles and just shapes that would change and morph. And that was my tunnel. And I was standing in the tunnel at one point going, that's cool. And I heard voices calling me on the other side. It's like, don't get stuck in the tunnel. There's more. And I was not met by family members. I was met by my 2 closest friends who obviously preceded me in death, and a bajillion animals, like every animal I've ever loved in my life. And that was my experience. Source is source. If you want to call it universe, grandfather, source, God, whatever you want to call it, we are all connected. What connects us all is love. It's not up here, it's in here. And that is something I already knew. So it wasn't like that was some eye-opening experience. The eye-opening experience for me was that my family wasn't there. I've lost a lot of people in my life, a lot. Well acquainted with loss. They weren't there. And what I have always intuitively known, and I've had several psychics that I studied with early in my life tell me that my family was not my family. I volunteered to be born into that family to help them heal. So from that standpoint, it would make perfect sense why I never felt like I was part of that family. And I never felt like they would be there. I just never thought they would be there. So I created that experience for myself. And it was fine. What mattered to me were these 2 people that were there, and all the dogs and cats and rabbits and guinea pigs and birds and so many, and tortoises and frogs and horses and you name it. I've probably taken care of it at one point in my life. And they were there. To me, that told me I was loved. There is no unconditional love like an animal. And that was what I needed in that experience. And that is also why it was so difficult for me to come back. I did not want to leave them.
Yeah. So one of the questions that someone would bring up is, and I don't know how you would answer this. So think about this for a second. So, all right. So how do I start this? So I've talked with other individuals who also proclaim, even though they haven't died, they might have been in concussions, or they might have been in a, out for a while, a coma or something like that. And, I don't know how you would, if you were in the same room with another individual who claims that they can People can talk to their family members or whatever, that kind of thing. And they have a vision that, oh no, you're going to meet God or the source or your higher power or your guardian angels or whatever, right? How would you handle a conversation with someone like that when you have actually passed away in your experience and have had something that doesn't necessarily match what they're proclaiming a person will ultimately go through when they die? How do you handle a situation like that, or do you not even say anything and handle it at all? What would your thoughts be on that?
I would say something probably regardless, but especially if the person was open. A lot of people are very closed. And if you've got someone who's very closed, it is not worth your breath to try to educate them. I've tried it. It doesn't work.
Yeah.
But we all create our own experiences. So whatever you believe is what you will experience. After I came back and I wrote my book, I talked to a lot of people who have had NDEs and a couple of other people who were in a coma or had some kind of a very severe concussion. And all of the experiences have similarities. We all always have the ability to speak to those on the other side. Most of us never develop that. So I think for me, and I actually had a priest tell me this, is that I think for you, because you're already working as a medium, going to the other side was, oh, that's what you look like. Okay. And he had a valid point, because I have always been so open to communicating with other beings, multidimensional beings, beings from extraterrestrial beings, from other realms, other dimensions, that to me, it was like, oh, hey, I've been talking to you forever, So maybe my experience was a little bit easier in some ways than a lot of other people. But I have spoken to a man who swears he went to hell. And I said, so you're a Christian? Oh, I don't have any beliefs. You have to believe in God to believe in hell. There's no hell without a heaven. And I watched his brain break right in front of me, because he had never thought of it that way. And he said, valid point. Turned around, walked away, never saw him again. I think I broke him. I swear, I probably broke this poor man. He's in the corner right now going, blah, 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 because it just, but we do create our own lives here. We create our own experiences there. That's how it works.
So one of the things that I wonder about, especially, is how long the energy maintains itself for, because I can attest to the fact that my father had tried, when he passed away, had tried to reach out up to 3 months. So I usually kind of use 3 months as a guide of, they might hang around for 3 months, or they might, be gone well before then. Some of them depends on once again, I agree with you, depends on their belief system. It depends on if I'm going to go and ascend to the highest cloud, if that's what their belief system is. So for an example, my husband's parents, they were very diehard Catholic. And I said, I've asked him a handful of times since their death, since the day that they were buried, I had an experience with his mother and also with his father, but there hasn't been hide nor hair of any kind of essence of them hanging around at all. My dad, it took till like February, 3 months. When I say February, December, January, February, before I finally, at that point, he just kind of didn't necessarily stop by anymore. So
Right.
I don't know. What are your thoughts about how long energies hang around for?
It depends again on the person, but I will tell you, sometimes people reach out before they go.
Mm-hmm.
My grandmother did that. I was sound asleep. My daughter was sound asleep. My grandmother died, and she came and woke us up and said, "I'm going now." And we're like, "No, you're not. Get back here." But that is, I've heard of other people having those experiences. Once they're on the other side, the soonest one I've been able to contact is about a month after they have crossed over. And people don't understand that. And here's how that works. An energy body is very different from our physical bodies. And on the other side, you have no physical body. You have an energy body. And to come back and communicate to your loved ones, you need a lot of energy. You need to build up that energy. Otherwise, you're going to come back and you're going to scare people because you're going to be an energy blob. They're not going to recognize you. So most people wait. There's been a couple that have not, but most people wait until they have sufficient energy built up and they know how to use the energy body. That's another thing, before they try talking to or reaching out to someone. I have had a couple of people, we got called in, I work with a couple of people doing paranormal investigation. We got called in because someone thought they had a demon in their house. And I went, not likely, but all right, we'll be there. And we walked in and I feel an old woman in an old like house dress that they used to wear with an apron on. Yeah. And I see her in the kitchen and she's got gray hair and she's got those bobby pin things keeping it up here. And I saw her and she looked and she smiled at me. And I went, okay, clearly not a demon. Yeah. And I asked questions. What are you seeing? What is going on? How is it, and they had freaked themselves out because initially when she started appearing, she was a blob. So they would get up in the middle of the night, they would see a blob. Oh, it's a demon, it's a blob. No. It was your grandmother trying to say hi, but she didn't have enough energy left, yet. And people jump to conclusions. Mm-hmm. Nothing against Christianity, believe what you want to believe, but they are the most likely, in my experience, devout Christians are the most likely to jump to that conclusion that something is demonic. Yeah. And it makes me laugh. Yeah. It makes me laugh. The same people will buy their teenage daughter a Ouija board, though.
I know.
It's like...
I know, so you can open it up and bring one in, so I don't know.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting how people grab onto certain beliefs. They either get you when you're really young, but you know what? My beliefs started out one way and they've actually have neutralized to something a little bit different now. And I do not believe that everything is a demon, although I have to tell you, I have friends that believe things are all demons. And it's like, no, I don't think so. I think it's just a grumpy old spirit that, is territorial and doesn't want you hanging around. That's put it in a different perspective and take a look at it differently. But, there are a lot of people who are very skeptical about a lot of things. And yeah, you don't attempt to convince them of anything. I know that in doing this for the longest time now and talking to so many people that I don't have to convince anyone of anything. If you want to believe that you're, I don't know, Michael Jackson or whatever you want to believe yourself to be, well, then I guess we'll just call you Michael Jackson, that kind of thing. We always were taught in law that if somebody sounds a little bit I don't know, out of off the beaten path, that if they want to sit and believe that that's what they are, well then okay, fine. We identify them as what they are. And that doesn't mean that they are Michael Jackson. It just means that that's how they identify them. And it's the same with your beliefs. If you want to identify that something is a demon or this or that, I wouldn't go saying that word very much. But the thing is there's nothing I can do to convince you otherwise unless you're ready to jump over the broomstick to something else. So it's pointless. Yeah, it's very pointless.
Yeah, it is totally.
So one of the things and this is a good place to move to. I want you to talk a little bit about the new book that you've got. That did you say the Family Secrets? Did that come out yet, or is that coming out?
October. It will be out around October 10th, as close to October 10th as I can make it. It's final formatting phase right now. So as soon as that's done, we're ready to go. It's there are bits and pieces in this book from paranormal investigations. There are a couple of things from my own life. Someone that knows me very well, has known me forever, was reading the book for me, and she said, "You have done that." Because there is a passage in the book where they're working on something, they're preoccupied over here, and there's a dead person yelling at them. And one of the characters turns around and says, "Not now." And I have done that. And she thought that was hilarious that I put it in the book. But I actually say that a lot. It's about one family. And it's about how they started out very bright, very light, very loving, very giving. And one very powerful woman in their ancestry dealt with a lot of loss by herself, and no one would help her. And she allowed that grief to fester and to make her mean and make her very angry and make her very vindictive. For years and years and years, I've been teaching spirituality. I've been teaching, do not let anger fester. And people were just like, didn't get it. So through this book, maybe they'll finally get it, because anger can do very horrible things. And this is about that woman going down a very, very, very dark path, and it leading to dark rituals and black magic and killing people and disappearing people and cursing people and all of those things that went through her descendants until one woman was born and went, "Okay, I've had about enough of this," and fixed it, or attempted to fix it. I can't say she's fixed it because it's not fixed, but she's working on it. And that, someone asked me, do you write anything without a lesson in it? No, probably not. Probably not. But it is based on a lot of paranormal investigations, based on people in Appalachia. If you spend a lot of time in Appalachia at any point, you're going to hear some of these stories because they've been passed down from generation to generation. And I spent a lot of time kind of, after my big, ugly, horrible divorce many years ago now, I ran away from home. And I just started talking to people, different areas, different, what do you think about the world? What do you think? What do you believe? And this book is sort of a hodgepodge of a lot of Appalachia culture and a lot of root magic. I grew up hearing about root magic, but most people did not. They had no clue what root magic is. There are some rituals that Cherokee, who had originally been in this area where the book is set, performed. But just like in Native American culture, particularly the Navajo culture, there are beings called skinwalkers. Desert Southwest. Yep, here we are. And it is kind of a similar story to what is in my book. It's someone who started out on a good path. They're a very good person, very positive person. And something happened that made them go, nope, and, take a left turn. Mm-hmm. And that's what happened in this book.
No, it's very interesting. That's interesting, and it's people can relate to this stuff. Think about how you come into this world, and some people are destined to either go to misfortune because of, maybe the upbringing, the environment, the whole 10 yards. Some of them want out of that, and so they change their lives to try to make their lives better. It sounds like there's a lot of interesting points in this book that will make people think. And on that note, now, how do people reach out to you? Website? Are these books on Amazon? I know she's got more than one, but are these?
I have a whole bunch of books on Amazon. This one is not yet. It will be. Yeah. The best way is probably ibbylanepress.com. It's IBBILANEPRESS.com. There's a way to reach out to me there. You can also find me on YouTube. I'm on all the social media. I'm a little bit of everywhere. If you spell Kellie with an IE, you'll find me, Kellie Fitzgerald. So.
Yeah, and I'll make a note of that so that way they'll see that. But yes, Kellie can be spelled 2 different ways, or 3 different ways actually. There's one.
A lot of different ways.
Yeah. Yeah, and can you also be reached on Facebook as well?
Yeah.
Okay, and I'll have all this in the show notes. So, well, when that book comes out and you're ready to write that next one, especially about that town, for next year, that's we'll have you back and we'll talk something about that town, because people are fascinated by these old Western towns, even if they're half alive or half gone. They do leave their mark. So anyway, on that note, thank you so very much, Kellie, for being on the show today.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching and listening to Paranormal Latte Podcast. We have been broadcasting on the United Public Radio and UFO Paranormal Radio Networks, 105.3 FM from the Gulf Coast and 107.7 FM in New Orleans, as well as several listening platforms. The content, music, and creative sound effects as heard on Paranormal Latte Podcast are copyrighted and licensed commercially to Dr. Kellie Renee Schutz. Please do not reproduce in any manner without the express permission of Dr. Kellie Renee Schutz, Diamond Point Entertainment, LLC, Paranormal Universal Press, LLC, Paranormal Latte Podcast, and or any affiliated networks such as the United Public Radio and UFO Paranormal Networks. The opinions and information expressed by the guests, hosts, and sources as heard and seen on the Paranormal Latte Podcast are not necessarily those of Diamond Point Entertainment, LLC, Paranormal Universal Press, LLC, Paranormal Latte Podcast, and the United Public Radio and UFO Paranormal Networks, as well as their producers. Although the content of the shows may be interesting, the information and opinions within are deemed for entertainment purposes only. Subscribe to continue your enjoyment and interest, and thank you for making Paranormal Latte Podcast part of your day. Now that was good.